"Show me how the whites love," asked an Apache woman to the lonely cowboy. The sun was slowly disappearing behind the wide horizon, turning the sky into streaks of orange and pink, and the air smelled of dust and dry grass. The plains stretched endlessly in every direction, empty and quiet, except for the soft sound of the wind brushing against the tall, golden grass. A lone cowboy rode through this vastness, his horse moving steadily over the uneven ground. He had been traveling for days, maybe weeks, but he had long stopped keeping track. His hat was low over his eyes, shielding him from the last bright rays of the day, and his coat was dusty from the long journey. His horse was tired too, its sides covered in sweat, yet it continued with loyalty, as if understanding that stopping wasn't an option. The cowboy had not come to this land searching for adventure or riches. He carried with him memories that he could not forget, memories that both haunted and guided him. He had grown up on a ranch far to the east, in a place where the world seemed smaller, where towns were close together, and where the people often judged each other harshly. But he had always felt out of place there. Something in him had always longed for wide spaces, for silence that allowed him to think, and for a life that wasn't defined by the expectations of others. That longing had brought him here to the wild open plains of the Southwest, where he could be alone with his thoughts, his horse, and the endless sky. As he rode, he noticed movement in the distance. At first, he thought it was only the wind playing tricks on his eyes, making the shadows dance on the uneven ground. But as he drew closer, he realized that it was something more real. There was a small camp, smoke rising gently from a fire and shapes moving around it. He slowed his horse and observed quietly from a safe distance. This was not his land, and he knew that wandering too close could be dangerous. Yet he could not help feeling curious. The camp belonged to a group of Apache people. They were going about their evening routines, tending to small fires, preparing food, and calling out softly to one another. The cowboy had heard stories of the Apache from other travelers and settlers, stories filled with both fear and fascination. But these were real people, alive and moving with purpose, and he could see the warmth in their actions, the care they showed for one another, and the pride in their eyes. There was a quiet dignity in the way they lived, and he could not look away. Among the group, a young Apache woman stood out. She moved gracefully but with confidence, her eyes sharp and curious. She noticed the cowboy almost immediately. Perhaps she had been observing him for some time, or perhaps it was simply instinct, but her gaze met his across the distance, unflinching. She stepped closer to the edge of the camp, standing with her hands folded calmly, and called out to him. Her voice was clear and steady, carrying across the open space. "Who are you?" she asked. The cowboy hesitated, unsure how to answer. He had no intention of causing trouble, and he respected the people who lived here, yet he knew that approaching them without permission could be seen as a threat. He did not speak immediately. Instead, he tipped his hat slightly in respect and nodded toward her, a silent acknowledgement that he came in peace. The woman studied him for a long moment, her dark eyes full of questions, but also of courage. Most travelers, she had learned, would not pause to look closely. They would pass by quickly or they would bring harm. But this man did neither. Then, in a voice that was both serious and curious, she asked something that made the cowboy stop in his tracks. "Show me how the whites love?" Her question was unusual, almost shocking, yet it was not asked in anger or mockery. There was a genuine curiosity behind it, a desire to understand something she had heard about but never seen clearly. The cowboy was silent for a long moment, staring at her. He had never been asked such a question before, not like this, not in such a direct way. And yet, there was a kind of honesty in it that made him pause and think deeply. He did not answer immediately. He looked at her, trying to find words that could explain something so complicated, something that could not easily be spoken in a few sentences. Love was not simple. It was not one thing. It was many things, and it meant different things to different people. He had experienced love in many forms, love for family, for friends, for the land, for his horse. But he had also known loss, heartbreak, and the loneliness that came when love was absent. How could he explain all of that to someone who had grown up in a world so different from his own? Instead of answering with words, he made a small gesture. He offered her a piece of dried meat from his pack, a simple act of sharing that required no translation. She took it without hesitation, her eyes softening slightly, and nodded. It was a small moment, but in it there was understanding. She had not asked for a gift, but she had received one, and she had acknowledged it. In that simple exchange, the cowboy realized that love could sometimes be shown in actions rather than words. It could be in the willingness to share what little one had, in the courage to approach someone unknown, and in the patience to wait for understanding. As the evening continued, the cowboy stayed near the camp, observing quietly. He watched how the Apache people interacted, how they laughed and worked together, how they cared for one another. Children ran around, playing and laughing, their voices filling the air with life. The elders spoke softly to the young adults, teaching them lessons about the land, about survival, and about respect. There was a rhythm to their lives, a balance that he had not seen in his own experiences, and it fascinated him. The young woman returned to the edge of the camp several times, watching him with curiosity and a kind of cautious trust. She asked questions about his horse, about the gear he carried, about the wide plains that stretched endlessly around them. He answered as best as he could, careful to respect their customs and boundaries. He began to understand that this encounter was not accidental. Perhaps fate, perhaps chance had brought them together. And perhaps there was something deeper at play, something that went beyond simple curiosity. Night fell completely, and the camp became quiet except for the crackling fire and the distant calls of animals in the dark. The cowboy remained near the edge of the camp, thinking about the question the young woman had asked him. He realized that her question was not just about love in the romantic sense. She was asking about understanding, about compassion, about how people connect with one another in ways that go beyond their own culture and experience. And he, too, was searching for understanding, searching for connection in a world that often felt lonely and harsh. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but steady. "Love," he said slowly, "is not always the same for everyone. It is shown in care and respect and in the choice to stay when leaving would be easier." The woman listened intently, nodding slightly, her eyes reflecting the firelight. She did not fully understand his words yet, but she felt their meaning. And in that moment, a quiet bond began to form between them, not of romance, but of mutual curiosity and respect. The cowboy knew he could not stay too long that night. He needed to rest, and his horse needed care, but he also knew that this encounter would stay with him forever. The young Apache woman had asked a question that no one else had ever asked him, and in doing so, she had opened a door to understanding, to connection, and to the possibility that even across cultures, people could find ways to understand each other. As he rode a short distance away to set up a small camp of his own, he kept thinking about her question. He realized that love was not something that could be taught in a single moment. It was learned slowly, through patience, through listening, through small acts of kindness, and through courage. And perhaps over time he could show her what he had learned in ways that words alone could never convey. The wind blew gently through the plains, carrying with it the scents of the night, the smell of dry earth, of grass, of smoke from the Apache fires. The cowboy sat by his small fire, staring at the stars that stretched endlessly across the sky. He thought about the journey ahead, about the challenges that might come, and about the strange, beautiful question that had been asked of him. For the first time in many months, he felt a spark of hope, a sense that perhaps he was not entirely alone in the world, and that connection, understanding, and even love might be possible in the most unexpected places. He drifted into sleep under the vast sky, with the sounds of the camp faintly in the distance and the memory of her eyes and her question firmly etched in his mind. This was only the beginning of a story that neither of them could yet imagine, a story of discovery, of courage, and of the ways that hearts from different worlds could meet and understand each other. The next morning, the cowboy woke to the soft light of dawn spilling across the plains. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of smoke from the Apache camp. He stretched his tired muscles, mounted his horse, and slowly rode closer to the small village. He knew he could not impose on their space, but curiosity and a strange sense of responsibility pulled him forward. The young Apache woman he had met the evening before was already awake, standing near the fire, tending to it with careful, practiced movements. Her presence seemed calm and natural, as if she belonged to the land itself. As he approached, she looked up and met his gaze. There was no fear in her eyes, only a quiet curiosity and a willingness to observe. She nodded at him, a small gesture of acknowledgement, and the cowboy returned it. He did not speak at first, letting the silence between them act as a bridge. In that quiet moment, he noticed the rhythm of her movements, the ease with which she interacted with her people, and the respect with which others responded to her. He began to understand that life in this camp was deeply connected, connected to the land, to each other, and to the traditions that had been passed down through generations. He offered her a small gift from his pack, a pouch of dried herbs and a few pieces of jerky. She accepted it with a soft smile, intrigued by the thoughtfulness behind his gesture. Words were not necessary, the act itself carried meaning. It was a quiet exchange, one that set the tone for the days to come. Over the next hours, he watched her move through her daily routine, helping the children gather firewood, offering guidance to the younger women, and speaking respectfully to the elders. She did everything with a calm confidence that he found both admirable and humbling. The cowboy began to participate in small ways. He helped carry water from a nearby stream, gathered firewood, and assisted in preparing the morning meal. Each task was simple, yet it required patience and a willingness to learn. He realized that living in this world meant respecting its rhythms and values, and he approached each task with care. The Apache woman observed him silently, her dark eyes never leaving him completely. She asked questions about his methods and watched how he adapted to the unfamiliar routines. There was a mutual curiosity forming, a silent understanding that both were learning from each other, even if words were few. By midday, the camp had settled into a comfortable routine. Children played near the edges of the village, laughter ringing out across the open plains. Hunters returned with small game, carefully handling their catch and offering portions to the elders. The cowboy watched with interest, learning not just the physical tasks but the meanings behind them. Every action carried respect and thoughtfulness. He noticed how the people worked together, supporting one another without complaint, sharing what little they had, and offering guidance to those who needed it. It was a way of life he had never experienced before, and he began to see that love could exist in quiet, unspoken forms, through care, respect, and shared responsibility. The young woman approached him again, carrying a small bundle of herbs. She held it out to him, and he accepted it with a nod of gratitude. She asked about his travels, about the lands he had seen and the people he had met. He answered honestly, telling stories of open plains, small towns, and lonely nights spent under the stars. He did not exaggerate, and he did not embellish. His words were simple, honest, and filled with the weight of experience. She listened intently, absorbing every detail, asking questions to understand not just the places he had been, but the feelings they had stirred in him. As the day wore on, the cowboy found himself reflecting on his own life. He had wandered for so long, seeking something he could not name, always running from the ghosts of his past. But in this place, among people who lived with intention and care, he began to feel a shift within himself. The Apache woman's question from the night before lingered in his mind. "Show me how the whites love." He realized that it was not a question that could be answered in words alone. It required action, patience, and a willingness to understand someone else's world without judgment. He decided to spend the evening showing small acts of kindness. He helped the children with their tasks, sharing stories to make them laugh. He assisted the elders in preparing their meals, taking care not to make mistakes or offend. He even offered to repair a worn piece of leather for one of the hunters, taking extra time to ensure it was done correctly. Each act, no matter how small, was a demonstration of care, respect, and willingness to participate in their world. And with each action, the young woman watched, learning from his approach and slowly beginning to understand the kind of love he carried, not loud or extravagant, but steady, respectful, and intentional. Night fell again, and the camp settled around the fires. The cowboy and the young woman sat at the edge of the circle, a small space between them but no real distance. They exchanged stories, some of them about the plains, some about family, and some about hopes and dreams. He told her about the loneliness he had felt, the struggles of life on the road, and the memories that haunted him. She shared her own experiences, though more cautiously, describing life in the camp, her family, and the lessons she had learned from the elders. Words flowed slowly at first, then more freely, as trust began to form between them. He began to understand that love, in its truest form, was not always about passion or romance. It was about patience, about understanding, about being present even when it was difficult. He showed her through his actions, in the way he listened, the way he respected the camp's rules, and the care he took in every task. She began to see that the world outside her camp was not always dangerous or cruel, and that people from other lands could show kindness and respect if given the chance. Over the following days, the bond between them grew. The cowboy learned the Apache language slowly, picking up words and phrases through repeated interaction. The young woman taught him not just the words, but the meanings behind them, the cultural context, the respect embedded in certain gestures, and the subtleties of communication that went beyond language. They spent hours together, sometimes working, sometimes simply observing the world around them, learning from one another without pressure or expectation. There were moments of quiet reflection as well. The cowboy would ride out to the edge of the plains, letting the wind rush past him, feeling the weight of his past lift slightly with every mile. The young woman would join him on occasion, walking beside his horse, sharing in the stillness of the open land. In these moments, they were not teacher and student, or outsider and insider. They were two people learning to understand and respect each other, discovering that connection could exist even across the widest divides. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, the young woman asked him again, quietly, "Can you show me more?" She did not specify what, and he did not answer immediately. He understood that she was asking to see more than gestures, more than words. She wanted to understand the heart behind his actions, the care that motivated him, and the willingness to stay present even when it would be easier to walk away. He nodded slowly, realizing that this journey was only beginning, and that every day together would teach them both something new about love, respect, and understanding. The cowboy felt a strange warmth in his chest, a feeling he had not experienced in a long time. It was not romantic desire, not longing or passion, but a deep sense of connection and purpose. For the first time in years, he felt that he was part of something larger than himself, that his actions could matter, and that understanding and respect could bridge worlds. The young woman, too, began to see that love was not confined to her own culture or experience, but could exist in unexpected forms, expressed through patience, care, and shared understanding. By the time night fully descended, with stars scattered across the dark sky, both of them sat quietly near the fire. Their shared silence spoke volumes of trust, curiosity, and the beginnings of understanding. The cowboy realized that his journey through the plains was no longer just a search for solitude or escape. It was a journey toward connection, toward learning, and toward showing the meaning of love in ways that transcended language and culture. And the young woman realized that the world beyond her camp was not entirely unknown or fearful, that hearts from different places could meet, learn, and respect one another. As the fire crackled softly and the night wrapped the plains in its gentle embrace, the cowboy thought about the days ahead. He knew there would be challenges, differences in culture, misunderstandings, and perhaps even dangers, but he also knew that he had found something rare, a chance to truly connect with another person, to teach and to learn, to show and to understand. And for the first time in a long while, he felt a quiet hope, a sense that even in a vast and sometimes lonely world, hearts could meet, understand, and care for one another. And so, under the endless sky, the cowboy and the young Apache woman continued their journey together, not just across the plains, but toward understanding, respect, and the slow, steady discovery of what it truly meant to love and be loved. Days passed, and the cowboy's presence at the Apache camp became a quiet part of the daily rhythm. He had grown accustomed to the routines, the laughter of the children, and the calm dignity of the elders. The young woman, whose curiosity had first drawn him closer, now moved around him with ease, sometimes asking questions, sometimes just observing silently. Both of them were learning, not only about each other, but about the world beyond their own experiences. The cowboy had begun to understand the meaning behind her question, "Show me how the whites love." He saw that love was not a single act or word, but a constant choice, expressed through patience, care, and respect. However, life in the plains was never without its trials. One morning, as the sun rose faint and pink over the horizon, a messenger came into the camp, running fast and calling out to the elders. The news was tense and unsettling. A small band of outlaws had been seen in the area. They were strangers who cared little for the people of the land and whose intentions could only bring danger. The elders called the villagers together, speaking in quiet but firm tones. The cowboy, standing at the edge of the gathering, listened carefully, understanding that these were no ordinary travelers. They could pose a serious threat to the camp. The young woman approached him, her eyes serious. "Will you help us?" she asked. There was no fear in her voice, only trust and expectation. The cowboy hesitated for a moment, thinking about the dangers that could arise if he became involved. But then he realized something important. This was not just a question of courage, it was a question of respect. If he truly wanted to show what he had learned about love, about care, protection, and connection, he could not turn away now. He nodded slowly and said, "I will help." The elders instructed the villagers on precautions. They organized watches, making sure someone would always be on the lookout for strangers, and they moved the camp's most vulnerable members to safer areas. The cowboy assisted where he could, helping reinforce barriers, checking supplies, and offering guidance where he could. Despite the tension in the air, there was a sense of calm determination among the people. They had faced dangers before, and they faced this one with courage and wisdom. The cowboy began to see that love, in its truest form, was sometimes expressed through protection and loyalty rather than simple kindness. As the day wore on, the threat of the outlaws lingered like a shadow across the plains. The young woman stayed close to the cowboy, asking about his experiences with danger and survival. He shared stories from his past, times when he had been forced to act quickly, times when he had protected someone he cared for, and times when he had failed. She listened carefully, asking questions that revealed her own sharp mind and understanding. For her, these lessons were not just stories. They were ways to learn courage, foresight, and the strength that comes from love expressed through action. Late in the afternoon, a distant sound carried across the plains, the faint clatter of horses' hooves. The cowboy immediately recognized it, and the villagers gathered quickly, preparing themselves. The outlaws had arrived sooner than expected. A few men appeared on the horizon, riding recklessly, unaware of the vigilance of the camp. The elders signaled for the villagers to stay calm, and the cowboy moved to a position where he could see without drawing unnecessary attention. He felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He could not allow these strangers to harm the people who had welcomed him, nor could he stand idle when action was needed. The standoff began with tense silence. The outlaws shouted threats from a distance, trying to intimidate the villagers. The Apache people responded with steady composure, refusing to show fear. The cowboy moved cautiously, staying close to the young woman, helping her maintain calm while ensuring that any children nearby were kept safe. Every moment was filled with tension, and every movement mattered. The cowboy understood that courage was not only about facing danger directly. It was also about protecting others, thinking clearly, and making decisions that could save lives. After several hours of careful negotiation and quiet maneuvering, the outlaws realized that the camp was not an easy target. The villagers' determination, combined with the cowboys' knowledge of the land and strategy, created a formidable defense. Slowly, the outlaws retreated, moving away from the camp and leaving the villagers in peace. The cowboy exhaled deeply, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. The young woman looked at him with admiration, not just for his bravery, but for the calm and thoughtful way he had handled the situation. That evening, as the sun sank low and the fires of the camp glowed warmly, the villagers gathered to discuss what had happened. There were no celebrations, only quiet gratitude and reflection. The cowboy and the young woman sat together at the edge of the circle, watching the flames dance. She spoke softly, "You showed me today what love can be." He looked at her, understanding that she was speaking of something deeper than romance. She meant the courage to protect, the patience to wait, and the choice to stand by others even when it was difficult. Over the next few days, life in the camp returned to its normal rhythm, but the cowboy and the young woman carried the lessons of that encounter with them. They worked together, learning more about each other's world. The cowboy helped with hunting, taught the young men a few techniques he had learned in his travels, and assisted the elders with tasks that required careful handling. The young woman, in turn, guided him in the ways of the land, how to read the tracks of animals, how to find water in hidden places, and how to understand the subtle signals of nature. They learned from each other in ways that went beyond words, creating a bond that was both deep and unspoken. During these days, the cowboy reflected on the meaning of the young woman's original question. "Show me how the whites love," he remembered. He now realized that love could take many forms. It could be shown through protection, through guidance, through patience, and through respect. It was not always loud or visible, but it was felt deeply in the actions taken for others, especially when those actions required courage or sacrifice. The young woman's trust in him, and the trust of the villagers, had given him an opportunity to demonstrate this understanding in a way he had never imagined. The young woman watched him closely, noticing the changes in his demeanor. He was no longer just a quiet observer. He was a participant, fully engaged in the life of the camp. She could see the care he took with every task, the respect he showed to the elders, and the way he moved cautiously but confidently when helping the villagers. Slowly, she began to understand that love was not a simple concept limited to words or traditions. It was an expression of character, an integration of thought, action, and intention. One afternoon, as the sun beat down on the plains, the cowboy and the young woman went out together to check on the livestock. They rode side by side, the horse moving steadily beneath them, and shared quiet conversation about the land and its creatures. He showed her how to notice subtle signs in the tracks of animals, how to anticipate movement, and how to act with care rather than force. She watched him, asking questions and trying the techniques herself, laughing softly when mistakes were made, and showing patience when learning was difficult. These shared experiences strengthened their bond, creating a rhythm of learning and understanding that was both natural and deep. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and red, the cowboy and the young woman returned to the camp. The villagers were preparing their evening meals, and the air was filled with the smell of cooking fires and fresh herbs. The cowboy helped where he could, moving quietly but effectively, while the young woman observed, sometimes guiding, sometimes stepping back to let him learn on his own. Their teamwork was seamless, built on trust, respect, and the shared understanding of what needed to be done. That night they sat together by a small fire, the stars above shining brightly. The young woman asked softly, "Do you think all hearts can learn to care like this?" The cowboy thought for a moment before answering. "I believe so," he said. "But it takes patience, and it takes courage to act even when it is difficult. Love is not only feeling, it is doing, protecting, and choosing to understand." She nodded slowly, absorbing his words, and for the first time she felt a clarity about the meaning of his world. The days that followed were peaceful, but both the cowboy and the young woman knew that life on the plains would always have challenges. Yet they had proven, through courage, cooperation, and careful thought, that love could exist even in difficult circumstances. They had learned that actions mattered more than words, that respect and trust could build bridges across cultures, and that understanding required both patience and attentiveness. By the end of the week, the cowboy had become not just a visitor in the camp, but a trusted member in the eyes of the people. He had demonstrated through his actions that he could care, protect, and respect. The young woman's question, once so daunting, now had an answer, though not a simple one. Love was not easy or immediate. It was built through time, through thoughtfulness, and through shared experiences that required honesty, patience, and courage. As they prepared for the approaching night, the cowboy reflected on what they had both learned. The outlaws had shown the fragility of safety, but the response of the camp had shown the strength of community. And in the middle of it all, he and the young woman had found a way to understand one another, bridging worlds that had rarely met before. He felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that their shared experiences had not only protected the camp, but had also begun a deeper journey of understanding and connection. And so, under the endless sky, the cowboy and the young Apache woman continued to learn, to teach, and to grow. Each day brought new challenges, new lessons, and new opportunities to demonstrate the love and care that words alone could never fully express. Through trials, reflection, and quiet courage, they were discovering the true meaning of connection, one that went beyond fear, beyond difference, and beyond the boundaries of tradition, creating a bond that was real, deep, and enduring. The mornings in the Apache camp had a rhythm that the cowboy had come to understand. Sunlight spread across the plains like golden water, and the wind whispered through the tall grass. Birds called from the distant hills, and the smell of the earth mixed with the faint smoke of morning fires. The cowboy had learned to move quietly among the villagers, offering help without asking for praise, observing without judgment, and listening more than he spoke. The young Apache woman often accompanied him, her presence a quiet reminder that understanding required patience, respect, and attention. She had begun to ask questions about the world beyond the plains, curious about the places the cowboy had traveled, the people he had met, and the ways in which love was expressed in his world. He tried to answer honestly without exaggeration, explaining that love could be simple or complicated, loud or quiet, immediate or slow. Sometimes it was expressed through words, sometimes through gestures, and sometimes through courage in difficult moments. He noticed that she listened intently, nodding slightly, her eyes reflecting thought and curiosity. She was learning not only about his world, but about the human heart itself. During one quiet afternoon, they walked together toward a nearby stream to fetch water. The cowboy showed her how to find the cleanest spots, how to notice small changes in the earth that indicated danger or safety, and how to respect the land as they worked. She watched him carefully, trying to understand both his methods and his mindset. "Do you think everyone loves in the same way?" she asked softly. He considered her question for a moment. "No," he said finally. "Love takes many forms. Some people show it with words, others with action. Some show it quietly and some loudly. The important part is that it is real. It comes from care and understanding." She nodded slowly, as if absorbing the idea into her own understanding of the world. As the days passed, small moments of learning continued to shape their connection. The cowboy helped the young woman with hunting techniques, teaching her how to notice patterns in the tracks of animals, how to anticipate their movements, and how to act without harming the balance of the land. She, in turn, guided him in her people's traditions, showing him how respect was woven into daily life, how a simple gesture could carry meaning, how silence could convey trust, and how actions often spoke louder than words. Through these shared lessons, they began to understand that love was not only an emotion, but a choice expressed through respect, patience, and presence. One afternoon, as they sat by the fire after a long day, the young woman spoke again, her voice thoughtful. "Show me again," she said softly. He looked at her and smiled gently, realizing that she did not want just words or stories. She wanted to see love in action, to feel its meaning in real moments. He knew that showing her would not be easy, for love could not be forced or performed. It had to be genuine, rooted in care and understanding. He nodded slowly. "I will," he said. Over the next few days, the cowboy demonstrated his understanding through small, meaningful actions. He helped the elders with tasks that required patience and care, showing respect for their wisdom and experience. He taught the children simple skills, not just for fun but for their future, and he offered guidance in ways that encouraged independence rather than dependency. The young woman observed all of this closely, recognizing that his actions were consistent, thoughtful, and intentional. She began to see that love could be demonstrated in ways that were steady and quiet, without the need for dramatic gestures or words. One evening, a quiet tension settled over the camp. A sudden storm had arrived, dark clouds rolling across the sky, heavy with rain and wind. The villagers moved quickly to secure their homes, their fires, and their supplies. The cowboy assisted wherever he could, reinforcing shelters, helping carry water, and guiding the children to safety. The young woman stayed close to him, learning how to act calmly in the face of uncertainty. In the storm's chaos, both realized that love and care were not always about comfort or warmth. They were about presence, protection, and the willingness to act when needed. After the storm passed, the sun returned, soft and warm, drying the wet earth and revealing the beauty of the plains in a new light. The villagers emerged cautiously, inspecting the damage and restoring order. The cowboy and the young woman moved among them, helping where needed, their actions silent but meaningful. They had shared the experience, learned from it, and demonstrated that love could also be expressed in resilience, courage, and responsibility. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between the cowboy and the young woman deepened. They had moved beyond simple curiosity and observation into a relationship of mutual respect and understanding. The young woman had begun to see the strength in quiet patience, the value in steady guidance, and the meaning of love expressed through care and action. The cowboy, in turn, had learned that love could be shared across cultures, that respect and understanding could build bridges, and that connection often required humility and willingness to learn. One evening, under a sky filled with stars, the young woman asked again, quietly but with intent, Do you think love is the same everywhere? The cowboy paused, thinking carefully. I think love is always about care, he said. But how it is shown depends on people, their culture, and their experiences. What matters most is that it is real and that it comes from the heart. Actions often speak louder than words, and understanding often takes time. She listened silently, nodding as if absorbing the truth in his words. They continued to share moments of learning, patience, and quiet connection. Sometimes they worked together, gathering food or repairing equipment. Sometimes they simply sat and watched the sun set over the endless plains, talking about hopes, dreams, and fears. Each moment carried meaning, each small gesture a lesson in understanding and care. The cowboy realized that he had found something he had been searching for all along, not just companionship, but the ability to truly connect, to teach and be taught, and to demonstrate love through thoughtful action. The young woman, too, had begun to understand the cowboy in ways she had never anticipated. She saw that his love was not just for one person or one moment. It extended to the land, to the people around him, and to the quiet choices he made every day. She began to understand that love was a skill as much as it was a feeling, something cultivated through patience, courage, and respect. Her own understanding of the world began to expand, seeing that hearts from different worlds could meet, learn, and care for one another. One morning, while walking together along a narrow path between the hills, the young woman spoke softly, "You teach me more than I expected." He smiled gently, feeling a warmth in his chest. "And you teach me as well," he replied. "You show me patience, understanding, and the value of observing before acting. Love is learned in small ways, and we are learning together." They continued walking in silence, the wind carrying the sound of distant streams and the cries of birds. It was a comfortable silence, filled with the understanding that their shared experiences had created a bond deeper than words could express. During this time, the cowboy also reflected on his past, understanding that his experiences of loneliness, loss, and wandering had shaped him. He realized that his understanding of love had been incomplete, limited by fear, solitude, and the mistakes he had made along the way. But now, through his connection with the young woman and the Apache people, he was learning new dimensions of care, patience, and commitment. Love was not just an emotion. It was demonstrated through action, through courage, and through respect for those around him. One evening, after a long day of teaching and learning, the young woman sat quietly, looking at the cowboy with intensity. "Do you think you could show me how the whites love in all ways?" she asked, her voice soft but serious. He looked at her, realizing that her question was not about romance alone, but about understanding culture, action, and heart. He nodded slowly, recognizing that the answer would not come in a single moment, but through continued patience, observation, and shared experience. As the night fell, the camp settled into quiet routines. Fires burned gently, casting soft light on the faces of those who had survived storms, outlaws, and challenges together. The cowboy and the young woman sat at the edge of the camp, their eyes reflecting the flickering flames. They shared no words at first, simply observing the life around them, recognizing that love, trust, and connection were built over time. Each small act, each gesture of patience, and each choice to protect and care created a web of understanding that tied them closer together. By the end of this week, the cowboy had begun to see himself in a new light. He realized that the question the young woman had asked him, "Show me how the whites love," was not a single challenge but a journey. It was a journey to demonstrate care through action, patience through observation, and love through respect. He understood that he was not just teaching her, but also learning from her, seeing the world through eyes that valued connection, courage, and community above all else. The young woman, too, had grown in understanding. She recognized that love was more than words, more than traditions, and more than appearances. It was expressed in action, guided by intention, and strengthened through mutual understanding. She began to see that hearts could meet across worlds, that respect and courage could build bridges, and that love, in its truest form, was about both giving and learning. And so, under the endless sky, the cowboy and the young woman continued their quiet journey of learning, understanding, and sharing. Each day brought new lessons, new moments of care, and new opportunities to demonstrate the love that transcended words and culture. They were discovering, slowly but surely, that love was a living, breathing thing, expressed through action, patience, and trust, and that it could bridge even the widest divides, connecting hearts in ways that were real, meaningful, and enduring. The days had grown warmer, and the plains shimmered under the bright sunlight. The cowboy had spent many weeks with the Apache camp, and he had grown accustomed to their rhythms, their laughter, and the quiet strength that guided their lives. The young woman had become his constant companion, though their bond was one of respect, learning, and deep understanding rather than simple friendship. Together, they had faced danger, shared knowledge, and slowly discovered the meaning of love in actions, patience, and courage. Yet the cowboy knew that his time in the camp could not last forever. He was a traveler by nature, and the plains had called him before, guiding him forward in search of experiences, understanding, and personal growth. Still, he felt a hesitation he had not expected. He had come seeking solitude, but he had found connection instead. The young woman had asked him to show her how the whites loved, and in teaching her, he had also learned something profound about his own heart. Leaving would not be simple. The young woman seemed to sense his thoughts. She approached him one morning, carrying a small woven basket of food for the journey, and looked at him with quiet intensity. "You will leave soon," she said softly, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. The cowboy nodded, not knowing exactly how to respond. Words felt inadequate. He had found meaning, trust, and care in this place, things he had long thought impossible to find. Her presence, her questions, and her patience had opened a new world to him, and he did not want to forget it. He spent the next few days ensuring that his departure would not cause disruption. He helped organize the camp, teaching some of the young men the techniques he had learned during his travels, and helping with repairs that would make life easier for the villagers while he was gone. The young woman followed him closely, learning and assisting, and their teamwork reflected the trust and understanding they had built over time. They moved seamlessly together, anticipating each other's needs, sharing gestures of care, and learning to express affection through action rather than words. One afternoon, as they sat together near a gentle stream, the young woman asked again, her voice quiet but firm, "Will you teach me everything you know before you leave?" He looked at her and smiled, realizing that the lessons of love were never truly complete. "I can share what I have learned," he said, "but the rest must be discovered through your own heart and experiences." She nodded thoughtfully, understanding that the true essence of love was not simply taught, it was lived, observed, and chosen every day. The cowboy spent hours sharing stories and lessons. He told her about the meaning of courage, explaining that it was not always about facing danger boldly, but about standing by others when it mattered most. He shared his understanding of patience, emphasizing that love required the ability to listen, to wait, and to respect another person's pace. He spoke about trust, showing her that it could only grow when actions matched words, when intentions were clear, and when hearts were sincere. The young woman listened intently, absorbing every detail, her eyes reflecting a mix of curiosity, admiration, and quiet determination. As evening fell, they prepared for his departure. The camp was quiet, and the villagers had begun their routines, seemingly aware of the significance of the moment. The cowboy packed his small belongings carefully, making sure that he left nothing behind that could be useful to the camp. The young woman stood nearby, her expression calm yet reflective. She handed him a small, hand-woven bracelet, a token of trust, respect, and connection. He took it carefully, recognizing the significance of the gesture, and tied it around his wrist, feeling the weight of both the object and the meaning behind it. Before leaving, the cowboy walked through the camp one last time, observing the people he had grown to admire and respect. Children ran and laughed, elders offered quiet guidance, and the villagers moved with a sense of purpose that reflected their deep connection to one another. He realized that love, as the young woman had asked him to show, was not always about words or feelings. It was about community, responsibility, and the choice to act with care and respect. This lesson would stay with him forever. The young woman approached him one final time, and they walked together to the edge of the plains. "Will you return someday?" she asked softly. The cowboy paused, considering the question carefully. "I cannot promise where the wind will take me," he said, "but the lessons I have learned here and the connection we share will never leave me. I will carry this with me wherever I go." She nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. They did not need grand words or promises. Their bond had already transcended the need for them. As he mounted his horse, the young woman gave a small nod, a gesture of farewell and recognition of the journey they had shared. The cowboy turned his gaze toward the horizon, feeling the vastness of the plains stretch endlessly before him. With a gentle touch to the horse's reins, he began to ride, moving steadily forward, the wind carrying him across the open land. Behind him, the young woman watched quietly, the hand-woven bracelet still on his wrist serving as a reminder of the lessons, trust, and understanding they had shared. The ride was long and quiet. The plains stretched in every direction, empty yet full of meaning. The cowboy reflected on the experiences he had shared, the challenges he had faced, and the lessons he had learned. He realized that love was not always visible or loud. It was often quiet, patient, and revealed through actions rather than words. The connection he had formed with the young woman and the Apache camp had shown him a new dimension of life, one that valued respect, courage, and understanding above all else. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky with warm shades of gold and pink, the cowboy felt a deep sense of peace. He knew that the journey ahead would continue to challenge him, but he also knew that he had grown, that he had learned, and that he had shared something meaningful. The lessons of love, patience, and understanding would guide him, shaping the choices he would make and the people he would encounter in the days to come. The cowboy paused for a moment, looking back toward the distant camp. He could see the young woman standing at the edge, her figure small against the vast landscape, yet her presence felt immense. In that silent moment, they acknowledged the bond they had formed, the journey they had shared, and the understanding that transcended words. Neither needed to speak. Their shared experiences had said more than any conversation ever could. As the plains stretched endlessly before him, the cowboy rode forward, carrying the lessons, trust, and connections he had gained. The young woman remained at the edge of the camp for a long time, her eyes following his movement, feeling a mix of sadness and hope. She understood that life would continue, that each of them would grow in their own way, and that the lessons they had learned together would remain, shaping their hearts and choices in ways neither could yet fully imagine. The cowboy's journey continued through hills, streams, and forests, yet he carried with him the quiet understanding of the Apache woman's question. "Show me how the whites love." Now he understood that love was not about color, culture, or words. It was about care, respect, courage, and the willingness to act in ways that made life better for others. Each gesture, each choice, each moment of attention was a demonstration of love, and he realized that he had experienced it fully in ways that were profound and lasting. In the weeks that followed, the cowboy encountered new people, new towns, and new challenges. Yet the lessons from the Apache camp stayed with him. He treated strangers with care, helped those in need, and acted with patience and understanding in every interaction. The memories of the young woman and the villagers guided his choices, shaping him into someone stronger, wiser, and more connected to the world around him. He carried their lessons not as a burden, but as a gift, an understanding of love that transcended words and distance. Meanwhile, the young woman continued her life in the camp, sharing what she had learned with her family and friends. She spoke of patience, respect, and the ways in which love could be demonstrated through actions rather than words. She taught the children to observe, to act with care, and to understand the hearts of others. The cowboy's presence, though now far away, had left a lasting impact on the camp, shaping their understanding of connection, trust, and compassion. One quiet evening, the young woman sat at the edge of the plains, watching the sunset. She thought of the cowboy and the journey they had shared. She realized that the lessons he had taught her were not only about love in the abstract, but about the courage, patience, and integrity required to live fully and meaningfully. She understood that their connection had changed both of them, leaving a mark that would endure in their hearts forever. The cowboy, far across the plains, looked up at the same sky. The stars were beginning to appear, scattered like diamonds across the darkening canvas. He thought of the young woman, the camp, and the experiences that had shaped him. He understood that love was not limited by distance, culture, or circumstance. It was a living, breathing force, expressed through action, patience, courage, and respect. And in that understanding, he found a peace he had never known, a deep sense of connection, even in the vastness of the world. As he rode into the night, the wind carrying the scent of earth and grass, he knew that life would continue to challenge him, yet he would face it with the lessons learned in the camp. He had discovered that love was not only a feeling but a choice. a choice to care, to respect, and to act with intention. He had experienced it, shared it, and would carry it forward, leaving a trail of understanding and connection wherever he traveled. And so the cowboy's journey continued, no longer lonely or aimless. He had learned the true meaning of love, trust, and connection. The young woman had learned the same, understanding that hearts from different worlds could meet, teach, and transform one another. Though they were apart, their bond endured, a testament to the power of patience, courage, and quiet, intentional care. The plains stretched endlessly, and the sun rose again, a new day beginning with promise, hope, and the enduring lessons of a connection that had changed two lives forever.